Teachers are supposed to build bright futures. But in The Teacher, one is digging graves to bury a scandalous past. And when dark secrets are unearthed, the person who uncovers them risks ending up 6 feet under, or maybe more. Let's find out together. Welcome to PlotCast. We meet Eve, a math teacher at Caseham High, married to Nate, the golden boy of the school. Nate's the kind of guy everyone notices. Handsome, charming, popular with both the teachers and the students. Everyone's got something to say about how lucky Eve is to have a husband like him. And sure, on paper, it looks like she's got it made. Nice house, stable job, a good husband. But something's off. Their routines become predictable. They get ready for school together every morning. Their sex life, once a month now. Eve's not sure if it's just her or if it's just the way things go, but she can't shake the feeling that something's missing. Nate drives a Honda Accord, nothing flashy. Their house is a modest 2-story with 3 bedrooms. Nate wants kids, but Eve's not so sure anymore. She stopped her birth control a year ago, but no baby has come yet. She's starting to wonder if it'll ever happen. Still, from the outside, everything looks perfect. That's when Eve has the thought that chills her. She wishes a truck would hit their car and take them both out in an instant. No mess, no fuss, just gone. Now let's switch gears to Addie's story. Addie doesn't want to go back to school. There's too much stuff hanging over her from last year. Something bad happened, something that has her practically scared to show her face. The whole school is still whispering about the scandal, about her and her math teacher, Mr. Art Tuttle. People saw her outside his house once, and the rumors went wild. Everyone thought they were having an affair, and it was ugly. Mr. Tuttle had to resign because parents freaked out, worried that he was fooling around with students. They said they didn't feel safe with him around their kids anymore. Addie's not the same since her dad died. Before, things were bad, but now, it feels like she's lost everything. Her one friend, Hudson, used to be her rock. They both had messed up families. Hudson's dad worked as the school janitor, and Addie's dad, well, he had a problem with alcohol and would pass out at home. They bonded over that shared, messed up life. But now, Addie feels like Hudson's abandoning her. He's hanging with the popular crowd, especially Kenzie Montgomery. Kenzie is the cheerleader, the kind of girl everyone notices. She's beautiful, confident, and knows how to make heads turn. Addie feels small next to her, but she doesn't confront Kenzie. It's easier to just let her bully her, even though she fantasizes about standing up to her. Lunchtime's no better. Addie sits alone trying to eat, but the loneliness hits hard. That's when Ella, the thinnest girl in school, invites her to sit with her. Ella talks about how much she hates school, especially things like trigonometry, and how much she can't stand Mrs. Bennett, the trig teacher. Ella teases Addie about Mr. Tuttle, pushing her to spill the gossip about what happened between them. Addie's annoyed. It feels like everyone just wants to turn her pain into some juicy story for them to gossip about. She storms out, tossing most of her lunch in the trash, and when she looks around, she sees Hudson watching her from his table, but he doesn't even come over. He doesn't say anything. Maybe he's just another person she's lost. Back to Eve's day. Eve's sitting in the teacher's lounge, sipping her coffee. Shelby's chatting away about her relaxing summer vacation, but Eve's not really listening. Her mind's still spinning over everything in her own life. Then, Shelby introduces the new French teacher, Haley. She's young enough that she could easily be mistaken for a student. Shelby jokes, asking Eve if she's jealous. Eve says no, but there's this tiny voice in the back of her mind, wondering if Nate's taking an interest in her. He's been spending more and more late nights at school, and his sex drive has dropped to practically nothing. It feels like something's off, but Eve doesn't want to face it. She wants to believe Nate is a good guy. Later, Eve's in her classroom, ready to teach her trig class. She's trying to keep the students engaged, making sure they're paying attention, rearranging desks, thinking about ways to keep them focused. When she calls roll, she notices Addie's name. Addie's in her class, but she's also in Nate's class. Eve can't help but remember how Mr. Tuttle warned her about Addie, saying she had just lost her dad and that she was trouble. So, Addie's first day at school is already shaping up to be the kind of mess she knows all too well. She tries to sit by the window in class, because why not? It's the first day, so really, no one owns the spot. But of course, Kenzie and Bella, who are apparently on a mission to ruin her day, make it their mission to push her out of the way. Addie doesn't put up a fight, though. She just moves to the front, where Mr. Bennett is teaching. And to her surprise, things aren't so bad. Mr. Bennett's clothes? Not flashy, but his wife's shoes? Okay, now those shoes scream classy. Addie's mom used to wear shoes just like that, and for a second it brings back all these memories of her mom trying to give her everything, even though they never really had the money. Then, boom, Addie notices how handsome Mr. Bennett is. Like, real handsome. She kind of forgets where she is for a second. When Mr. Bennett asks the class to share their favorite poems, Addie's heart beats a little faster. She's got a chance here to impress him, and she's not going to miss it. She practically sits down in Mr. Bennett's lap. Okay, not really, but she's so close to his desk, she could almost touch it. Her eyes land on a book sitting there, and she catches a peek at the spine. It's a collection of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. And guys, Edgar Allan Poe is like her #1 favorite poet. So of course, that's the poem she's going to recite. Without hesitation, Addie stands up and delivers Annabel Lee. It's something she spotted on his desk earlier, but it's more than just memorized words. It's her. Mr. Bennett's reaction? Pretty much perfect. He looks at her like she just said the smartest thing ever. And then, to her shock, he winks. She's got a teacher crush for sure, but at least it feels like she's got a place here. For once, the homework and lack of friends don't matter. She's feeling good. Now, let's talk about Eve. Eve's first day is just chaotic in a whole different way. She gets dropped off early. No plans, nothing to do. So naturally, she goes for a drive. She ends up at a crowded mall, but as soon as she spots a couple of her students, she freezes. Why does running into students outside school feel so weird? She's supposed to be the grown-up here, but it's hard not to feel like she's in high school again. She wanders into this high-end store called Footsie's. And let's be real, she's weak when it comes to luxury. The temptation to buy those Christian Louboutin pumps is strong. She knows she can't afford them, but hey, no one's perfect, right? She can't resist. So she slips the shoes into her purse. And then, bam, the alarm blares. She panics. Of course, the store clerk mistakes her for a paying customer, but Eve's still rattled. The whole thing's a wake-up call. She's not a teenager anymore, but sometimes it feels like she never grew up. She drives home, hoping to get a little peace, but Nate's cooking dinner. He's tired. Same old excuse. She knows what that means. He's pulling away again. She tries to get close, but it's like pushing on a brick wall. Another night of feeling disconnected. It's hard to ignore the sinking feeling that something's just missing. Back at school, Addie's dealing with her own set of problems. Gym class is always a drag, especially when it involves the awkwardness of having to shower after. She avoids the whole thing as much as possible. Kenzie, of course, makes sure to make it worse, mocking Addie for not shaving her legs. Just the kind of thing that makes Addie feel even more isolated. But then, Mr. Bennett's class. That's the only thing that keeps her going. She might be having a rough time, but at least she has that one thing, his class, and maybe a chance to prove herself. After class, Mr. Bennett hands back the poems the students wrote. When he gets to Addie's, he places it face down. Cue the anxiety. Addie's brain goes into full panic mode. Did she mess up? Is her poem too dark? Is he going to call her out? But nope. Instead, Mr. Bennett says her poem is amazing. He suggests she should try to get it published in the school's poetry magazine. Addie's stoked, but also scared. She's never shared her writing with anyone, let alone strangers. But Mr. Bennett's kindness convinces her to give it a shot. She'll go to the meeting. She doesn't know if it's a good idea yet, but she figures it's worth a try. Meanwhile, Eve has her own run-in with Art Tuttle at the grocery store. Yep, that Art Tuttle, the one with the scandal attached to his name. The guy who's been accused of being inappropriate with Addie. But no one ever found concrete proof. So here he is, looking like a shadow of himself, wearing a tight turtleneck, sandals with socks, and holding a bag of oranges. When they talk, Art seems off. His eyes are bloodshot, and his breath smells like whiskey. It's clear that the fallout from the whole thing has destroyed him. Eve feels a little bad for him, but she's also uneasy. He tells her to be careful around Addie. He says Addie's trouble, that she's not well. Eve listens, but she's skeptical. Is Art just bitter, or is there something to his warning? Still, she tries to be nice and offers him a ride. When they get to his house, his wife Marcia isn't shocked by anything Eve says. Art's been spiraling for a while, and it's clear that his life is a mess. Eve tells herself she'll just treat Addie like any other student. Keep it professional, no matter what. Addie is rushing to her first poetry magazine meeting when she sees Hudson, her former best friend and secret crush, standing with Kenzie, the most popular girl at school. They're standing close, talking like they're in their own little world, and it stings. It's weird seeing Hudson with Kenzie now. He used to laugh at girls like her, but now he's, well, with her. As they stand there, Addie feels a bitter mix of jealousy and hurt. She catches a glimpse of Kenzie's fancy backpack, the one with the sparkly keychain that has her name on it. And suddenly, Addie's brain is working overtime, calculating what would happen if she just took it. Maybe it's a moment of rebellion. Maybe she just wants to feel like she has some kind of power in a world where everyone else seems to hold the cards. Before she even realizes it, she's slipping Kenzie's keychain off the zipper and into her pocket. The feeling that follows is strange, like she's finally got control over something, even if it's as small as this keychain. Addie immediately tries to shake off the guilt that starts creeping in. But at that moment, the sting of seeing Hudson and Kenzie together, laughing like they don't care about her, overshadows everything else. After that, she heads to the poetry magazine meeting. As she walks into the meeting, Mr. Bennett greets her with a warm smile and introduces her to Lotus, the editor-in-chief. Lotus is, well, not exactly warm, but she does read Addie's poem and admits that it's good, though dark. She offers a few tips to make it even better. It's a small victory for Addie, who's still grappling with the weight of the past and all the awkwardness surrounding Mr. Tuttle's scandal. But then Lotus brings it up. The scandal. She doesn't believe Addie's side of the story. And it stings. Still, Addie's not backing down. She's here for the poetry, for herself. She's gonna make it work. Holding onto Kenzie's keychain in her pocket, Addie feels a strange sense of control. Like maybe for once, she's the one who's in charge of her story. So Eve's at home, and out of nowhere, her husband Nate is in a surprisingly good mood. I mean, he's actually whistling, which is a rare sight. He kisses her. Yes, an actual kiss. Not one of their scheduled ones. But today, he's in a good mood, which makes Eve feel, well, kind of sad. Like, yeah, he's being nice. But it reminds her of how long it's been since Nate's written her any poetry. Which, let's be real, is the one thing that made her feel loved when they first got together. Then when Nate asks about dinner, Eve, in classic Eve style, lies and says she's meeting up with her friend Shelby. She knows Nate won't check up on her. He's just too checked out. She grabs her jacket, heads out, but instead of hanging with Shelby, Eve does what she always does when she's feeling down. She hits up the shoe store. Now listen, Eve's got a complicated thing with shoes. She feels like they're gonna fix whatever's wrong in her life, even though that never works. But tonight, she's feeling kind of bold and sneaky, and when she walks into the store, it's almost closing time. But she's like, I'm not leaving empty-handed. She finds the perfect pair of shoes, tries them on, and hold up, there's this super charming salesman, Jay, who's giving her all the right compliments. He even calls her Cinderella. And she's like, okay, I'm feeling this. But wait for it. This is where it takes a wild turn. Jay locks the door, and just when Eve thinks things are getting a little too cozy, he kisses her. Eve's head is spinning, and this secret thing with Jay, has been going on for months now. A whole sneaky little side affair. She knows it's wrong, but for a second, when she's with Jay, she feels special. She feels wanted in a way Nate doesn't make her feel anymore. But deep down, she knows this can't last. It's all a temporary fix. But right now, she's clinging to that happiness like it's the only thing keeping her afloat. Then we switch gears to Addie, who's been going to these poetry magazine meetings at school, reflections. And you can just tell she's starting to find her rhythm, like she's finally feeling like she belongs. Even though Lotus sometimes acts like she doesn't even want Addie there. But whatever, Addie's been pushing through, and after one of the meetings, Mr. Bennett, her English teacher, tells her that her poem is good enough to be submitted to a big statewide competition. Addie's shocked. Like, what? She didn't even think her poem was anything special. But Mr. Bennett's all praises, saying she's got something amazing here. He even offers her a ride home, but Addie, still a little scarred from her experience with Mr. Tuttle, politely refuses. But then, Lotus goes in on her, accusing her of being Mr. Bennett's favorite, and that's why her poem got picked. Lotus can't even hide her jealousy, and Addie, even though she knows the poem was picked for its merit, starts questioning herself. Was Mr. Bennett just playing favorites, or did he honestly see something special in her work? Now let's go back to Eve for a sec. She's turning 30, and she's got this whole where's my life going vibe going on. You know, like when you're at that age and start feeling like time is slipping through your fingers. Her mom's grilling her about the lack of grandkids. Nate's acting all distant, not really giving her the attention she's hoping for. He turns down her offer for a little birthday, you-know-what. And when he does say he'll take her out to dinner, there's no excitement in his voice. Eve's over it. She's been trying to hold on to the good parts of their marriage, but lately it's like she's living in a fog. She's even wearing these new fancy shoes, which she knows Nate would hate because he's always on her case about spending too much on shoes. But today, she's like, whatever, I'm going to treat myself. Then something unexpected happens. Eve gets a message on Snapflash, which is basically this app high schoolers use to keep their private lives hidden from their parents. It's a pretty slick app. Messages disappear after 60 seconds, so it's perfect for all the secrets people want to keep under wraps. Eve's not a teen, but she's definitely using it for some secretive texting of her own with Jay, the shoe salesman she's been seeing behind Nate's back. When Eve opens the message, it's Jay, wishing her a happy birthday. The brief connection she gets from him, even though it's just for a minute, makes her feel more special than anything Nate has done in ages. The message disappears, but Eve's smiling to herself, feeling seen for the first time today. She knows it's risky, but hey, at least it feels like something. Now, we shift gears to Addie, who's having one of those days where you just want to hit the reset button. Gym class is a nightmare, and today's no exception. She's forced to run 50 laps. 50. She's not about that life. Kenzie, of course, who's the queen of the gym, gets away with doing fewer laps, and the whole thing feels unfair. But it gets worse. Addie's clothes are straight up stolen by Kenzie, and when Addie asks for them back, Kenzie mocks her. Addie's embarrassed and frustrated, especially since she can't even get out of her sweaty gym clothes. So she searches the locker room, but guess what? She finds her clothes soaking wet in the shower. Now she's stuck. She can't walk around school in soaking wet clothes, so she shoves them into her bag and just has to put her gym gear back on. Not the greatest look, but she doesn't have a choice. Then, to make things worse, she heads to math class, where Mrs. Bennett doesn't exactly give her a warm welcome. She's late, she's sweaty, and when she hands in her homework, yep, you guessed it, her wet clothes have soaked through her bag and made her homework all soggy. Mrs. Bennett's not having it. She throws her homework away and tells Addie to redo it. Addie feels like she can't win today, and honestly, who can blame her? She's frustrated. But she knows she has to play along if she wants to keep her grades intact. Addie's gym clothes? Let's just say they still smell like a wet dog, even though they're technically dry. I mean, imagine everyone noticing and giving you side glances. So what does she do? Classic Addie move. Tries to wring them out in the bathroom sink, but now they're even more soaked and definitely more smelly. She's like, cool, this is going so well. She barely makes it to class just after the bell rings, looking like a disaster. And Mr. Bennett, the angel that he is, notices her struggle. He offers her a pass to leave class early, basically telling her to go home, relax, and just not deal with this disaster for one more second. You can feel her relief, but the embarrassment? That's not going anywhere. So Addie's heading home when she gets this wild thought. Remember how she swiped Kenzie's house keys? Yeah, she knows exactly where Kenzie lives. And though she's kind of on the fence about what she even plans to do with those keys, that curiosity, it pulls her in. She walks past Kenzie's house, her mind spinning with possibilities. But breaking into Kenzie's house? Nah. She's not trying to get arrested or attacked by some weird dog. She just keeps walking. Now, here's where it gets a little more emotional. Addie walks through the door to her house, and her mom's chilling on the couch, reading, just being, well, a mom. She's reminded of the plan they had to visit her father's grave. And honestly, Addie doesn't even want to go. She's angry, really angry at her dad for everything he put them through. The alcoholism, the abuse, she's not about to dress up for a man who never deserved any respect. And for a second, it feels like her mom's about to push back. But then she doesn't. Her mom surprises her, saying they don't have to go. And instead of the graveyard, they decide to go out for dinner. Honestly, it's like the smallest win, but it's something, right? A nice little shift from all the family tension. Now we've got Eve's birthday, and things are awkward to say the least. She's all dressed up in a red dress and expensive shoes, ready to feel special. But what does she get? Nada. Nate, her husband, barely even notices. Ugh, the worst. They head to a restaurant, but not the fancy one Eve had in mind. Nate picks some out-of-the-way place that's nowhere near what she wanted. Awkward silence fills the car ride. I mean, this whole day, it's falling apart. They get to the restaurant, and there's this weird moment when Nate spots Addie, and Eve's heart just sinks. She can't shake the memory of Art Tuttle, that teacher who got way too close to Addie, and now she's worried Nate might do the same thing. She's like, please don't, Nate. Eve's worried about her marriage and that secret she's been keeping with Jay, and she tries to make things right, but honestly, she feels like it's all slipping through her fingers. Then we get to Addie again. Poor girl can't even eat dinner without being distracted by Mr. Bennett. She notices the tension between him and his wife, Mrs. Bennett, and it's like too much. She watches him, curious about everything. Like, what did he order? Why is he so quiet with Mrs. Bennett? She heads to the bathroom, but when she's waiting, guess who shows up? Mr. Bennett. They chat briefly, and he's all concerned about how Addie's holding up. That moment feels special, like Mr. Bennett really cares. Then he gives her this bizarre yet oddly comforting assignment, to write an angry letter to the person who's made her feel bad. And Addie's like, I could do that. I could totally do that. As she thinks about it, she's torn between Kenzie, who bullies her, and Mrs. Bennett, who seems to be the root of all Mr. Bennett's unhappiness. Eve is back in the mix. After a disappointing birthday dinner, she heads home, and her husband Nate's too tired to even pretend they're anything close to intimate. So she just agrees to go to bed early, counting down the hours until her 30th birthday, which feels totally unremarkable. But then, hold up, there's a message from Jay. You know, the guy she's been trying to cut off but can't seem to get rid of? He's left her a present at the door. Red pumps she's been eyeing for ages but couldn't afford. I mean, it's like he knows exactly what she wants. She's touched, but also conflicted. Her love life is a mess. She can't be with Jay, but she can't seem to shake him either. And when she opens the door to look for him, nothing. No Jay. Maybe it was just in her head. Either way, her birthday ends in this awkward, emotional void. So Addie's already dealing with enough. The last thing she needs is to walk up to her locker and find it absolutely stuffed with shaving cream. And no, this isn't some innocent prank either. It's a full-on setup. Someone cut the lock and totally destroyed her locker. And if we're being honest, who else would pull something like this but Kenzie? She's been making snide remarks about Addie's grooming habits for ages. As the shaving cream's spilling out and everyone gathers around to watch, it's like a stage performance with Addie as the unintentional star of the show. Kenzie's not even going to own up to it. She's the queen of playing innocent while everyone else does the dirty work for her. Addie's stuck, caught in this cruel mess, knowing that if she even tried confronting Kenzie, it would just make everything 10 times worse. And then enter Mrs. Bennet. Now, you'd think a teacher would step in with some kind of sympathy, right? Wrong. She comes up, sees the mess, and what does she do? She tells everyone to leave. She's making Addie clean this up alone instead of showing any kind of support. Mrs. Bennet's got zero sympathy, just orders, and it makes everything feel so much worse. Now, as Addie's scrubbing away at the shaving cream, she starts thinking back to something that really changed everything for her. It was about a year ago, and things were bad at home. Her dad came back from drinking, as he often did. He started yelling at Addie, calling her all kinds of names, just being a total mess. But then Hudson was there. He was just hanging out, trying to stay out of the way, but when her dad saw him in her room, he flipped. And I'm talking full-on rage mode. He started yelling at Hudson, too, saying stuff that wasn't even necessary. He stood up to Addie's dad, but that didn't go over well. Her dad, in his drunken state, pushed Hudson back, hard, and in the chaos, he tripped. And when he tripped, it wasn't just a stumble. He fell down the stairs, and that was it. Addie's dad didn't get up. He was gone. Now, Hudson, of course, was terrified. He was just a kid, and suddenly this horrible accident had happened right in front of him. Addie's first instinct was to protect him. She couldn't risk anyone finding out what happened. They had to keep it a secret. The next day, they went to school like nothing happened, pretending like everything was fine. But it wasn't. Hudson stopped talking to her after that. Their friendship was never the same again. And Addie? Well, she's been carrying that guilt with her ever since. Back to the present. Addie's still standing in front of her locker, cleaning up that shaving cream, but her mind's stuck in the past. It's like every single thing she's been through, every bit of trauma is weighing on her. And then, just when she thinks she might have a moment to breathe, Mr. Bennet shows up. The one person who seems to get it actually sees her struggling and offers to help clean up the mess. It's such a small thing, but for Addie, it's a relief. Like, someone cares. After they finish cleaning, Mr. Bennet notices Addie's going to have to bike home in the rain. He offers her a ride, and Addie's hesitant at first, because getting in a teacher's car might look weird, especially after that whole thing with another teacher a while back. But Mr. Bennet reassures her that it's no big deal. And honestly, Addie could really use a break, so she accepts. They drive home in Mr. Bennet's gray Honda Accord. Addie notices everything. The way his car smells, the casual comfort of it all. It's strange but nice. In the car, they talk. They talk about everything. About Kenzie, about the bullying. Mr. Bennet listens like it's not just teacher-student stuff. And then they even talk about poetry. Mr. Bennet shares this funny poem he wrote as a kid. And for the first time in a while, Addie feels like maybe things aren't completely awful. When they get to her house, there's this weird moment, like a first date or something. But then she smiles to herself as she gets out of the car, and that smile is like a little bit of hope. Meanwhile, things are spiraling for Eve. She's at the shoe store with Jay, trying on these fancy shoes, but she's reminding him, I can't afford these. Still, Jay's helping her, and it's clear they've got this connection. But then, Eve drops a bomb. She admits she can't leave Nate. She feels trapped, like she's stuck in a life she can't escape from. She wishes she could run away with Jay, but she knows it's not possible. And then Jay gets a call. It's from someone, but it's enough to remind Eve that their relationship is ending soon. Eve feels this wave of unease, especially when she has to kiss Jay goodbye in public. She knows she's got to make a decision about her life with Nate, but right now, she's stuck in this limbo. And then we're back to Addie, who's stressing about her math midterm. She doesn't get the material, and she's got no one to help her. She considers asking her mom for a tutor, but she doesn't want to burden her with more problems. So what does Addie do? She cheats. She copies answers from Kyle, the smart kid who always gets A's. But as soon as the test is over, she feels this crushing guilt. Like she knows what she did was wrong, but there's nothing she can do to take it back. But Kenzie, being the worst, catches Addie in the act. She's got something on her, and she's not going to let it go. She tells Addie that she'll report her unless she does something humiliating. Kenzie demands that Addie lick the floor in English class for a minute. A minute? It's disgusting. And Addie's mortified. But Kenzie's got her in a corner, and Addie's forced to make the worst decision of her life. Things don't get any better when Addie gets a note from Mrs. Bennett. She's terrified it's about the cheating. Addie meets with Mrs. Bennett, who confronts her about copying Kyle's answers. Addie admits to it, but it feels like there's no way out now. Mrs. Bennett says she's going to report it to the principal tomorrow. And just like that, Addie's dread hits an all-time high. She knows this is going to be bad, especially when it gets back to her mom. But Addie's had enough. She's done being the doormat. No more letting Kenzie win. She's ready to stand up for herself. Eve's home. The evening's winding down, and she's just had one of those rare moments where everything seems right. She walks in and there's Nate, all relaxed, making dinner, or maybe just chilling in that way only married couples can do after a long day. But hold up. They kiss. I mean, it's the kind of kiss where you can feel the tension dissolve. Like all those unsaid things, those quiet frustrations, just gone. But as the night rolls on, things start to settle. They're lying in bed, chatting casually. Then Nate asks about Eve's student, Addie. Yep, the same Addie who just totally messed up by cheating on her test. Eve plans to report her. It's the right thing to do, right? Like zero tolerance and all that. But Nate, in his infinite wisdom, or maybe just because he's a sucker for a sob story, suggests Eve take a softer route. Give her a break, he says. Addie's been struggling, and maybe the whole cheating thing was just a knee-jerk panic reaction. Eve thinks about it, and then she agrees. A 0 on the test, but no principal. Addie's lucky, but as Eve's still lying there, trying to wrap her head around the whole situation, she gets a message. It's from Jay, someone who actually shows Eve the attention Nate used to. Now, that's where Eve's mind starts to wander. Should she reply? What's going on with her marriage if she's still getting these messages from Jay? The whole situation is confusing, and Eve's emotions, they're all over the place. But she replies anyway, agreeing to meet up with Jay. And then we switch to Addie. Now, Addie has keys to Kenzie's house. Yep, those same keys Kenzie lost ages ago. She sneaks in through the back door. At first, it's all quiet. Addie's just kind of wandering around, peeking into rooms, rifling through drawers. There's definitely some guilt mixed with her desire for revenge. And now Addie wants to get back at her. She's not proud of it, but she feels justified. You get it, right? That kind of anger? It makes you do stuff you wouldn't normally do. And oh boy, when Addie finds a love note from Kenzie's boyfriend, Hudson, it's like a slap in the face. She's hurt, she's bitter, and it doesn't help that she's still thinking about Nathaniel Bennett, her English teacher. She's got all this stuff happening inside, and now she's at a breaking point. She's pissed. So what does she do? Breaks a ceramic bird. Classic Addie. Just releases that frustration and anger in the only way she knows how. But then, she starts to feel guilty. And as she stands there, thinking about Bennett's kindness and her own actions, she gets even more conflicted. Before she can do anything else, there's a noise downstairs. Cue the panic. Addie's heart is pounding like she's just committed a crime. Because, well, she kinda has. She's about to be caught, and she's definitely not trying to end up in jail. But then, the noise? Turns out it's just Kenzie's cat knocking over a pitcher. Addie takes a deep breath, grabs her shoes, and sneaks out, making sure she doesn't leave a trace. Mission aborted, but she's lucky this time. Cut to Eve again. She's meeting with Addie, the girl she caught cheating on her midterm. Addie's nervous, obviously, and Eve, while a little annoyed, decides not to blow the whistle. Instead, she gives her a 0, throws a couple of tutors her way, and tells her, "Hey, you better do better next time." It's a second chance, but Addie knows it's more than she deserves. Still, she's super thankful. Eve is only being lenient because of Nate. She doesn't really care about Addie. She just doesn't want to rock the boat. And then back to Addie. She's feeling like the luckiest girl alive. She dodged a bullet with Kenzie's house, and now Eve's cut her a break. Plus, Mr. Bennett's praising her poem. Can this day get any better? Well, it does. Because now, Mr. Bennett tells Addie that he spoke with Eve and convinced her to be lenient. Addie's overwhelmed with gratitude, so much so that she hugs him. During the hug, she notices something inappropriate. And Mr. Bennett, he gets all embarrassed and explains it away. But the thing is, they both feel this undeniable connection. It's like some invisible force is pulling them together, and before they know it, they kiss. Addie and Nathaniel, Mr. Bennett, find themselves in the darkroom. And not just in a literal sense. The whole vibe is so charged with this magnetic connection that you can practically feel the sparks flying. Addie, in her head, is like, whoa, this is actually happening. And she's overwhelmed by how real their bond is. Nathaniel, though, he reassures her, telling her that it's not just about the physical thing. It's the emotional connection they share that's drawing him in. And man, she's feeling it. Every second of it. Now, even though this is a totally heated, intense moment, Nathaniel, who's super aware of the consequences, still decides to drive Addie home afterward. So as they're cruising along, holding hands, Nathaniel starts to open up. He admits that his marriage to Eve, Mrs. Bennett, is basically a sense of duty, not love. He's pouring his heart out, saying he believes Addie is his soulmate. Addie, still processing all of this, promises not to spill the beans about what's going on, and it's like this unsaid agreement between them. We've got this secret, and we're sticking to it. Nathaniel's all, "You've inspired me to write poetry again, Addie. My wife never supported that." And Addie's like, wow, someone gets her passion for writing. So they're both feeling close, but also tangled up in the complexities of what they can and can't do. But then they reach Addie's house, and Nathaniel has to pull the brakes. Not literally, but you know what I mean. He stops the car a block away, doesn't want to risk being seen. It's all about secrecy now. And the two of them, they're just holding on to this little piece of hope that one day they won't have to hide anymore. But for now, it's all about keeping it on the down low. Switching gears, Eve's having a super weird moment at home. She's on the couch, grading papers like it's just another day in the life. Then Nate comes home, acting all, well, too affectionate. Seriously, out of nowhere, he's being all touchy-feely, which is like so not his usual thing. Eve's a little caught off guard, even thinking something's up. Is he okay? Like, what's going on? When she turns him down, because, plans with Jay and all that, he flips. He accuses her of always complaining about their lack of intimacy, but then rejecting him when he actually shows interest. Nate storms off, slamming the door. Eve's left standing there, totally confused, and honestly just a little worried. Like, what is going on with him? Meanwhile, Addie's back at school and her mind is somewhere else. Let's be real, she's counting down the minutes until she can slip away to the darkroom with Nathaniel. She's supposed to be focused in her Reflections poetry meeting, but she's, distracted. Lotus, her so-called friend, decides to take a jab at her poem. She calls it sappy and unoriginal. And honestly, you can feel Addie's face turn red with embarrassment. But no, she's not going to let it stop her. Instead of letting Lotus's words crush her, Addie decides that she's not going to share this poem with Nathaniel just yet. It's too personal. She needs to keep it to herself for now. After the meeting, Addie's just over it. Lotus even invites her for pizza, which is actually a nice gesture, but Addie's like, I've got better plans. She dashes off to the darkroom, the only place where she feels at home. And when Nathaniel finally shows up, it's like the whole world fades away. He greets her with this warmth, this kindness, and then he surprises her with a poem he wrote just for her. Life nearly passed me by. Then she, young and alive, with smooth hands and pink cheeks, showed me myself, took away my breath, with cherry red lips, gave me life once again. I mean, come on, who wouldn't melt? Addie's practically floating on air. It's like a dream come true. Then things get physical. And yeah, it's not just a kiss anymore. In the darkroom, Addie loses her virginity to him, while the words of his poem echo in her mind. Back at school, Addie's head's in the clouds. But things aren't so dreamy in English class. She's trying, but it's hard to concentrate with Nathaniel on her mind. And don't even get me started on the poetry contest. Her friend Lotus wins. Nathaniel had actually entered Addie's poem, and she thought it was in the contest. Addie feels betrayed. Like, what happened? So she confronts Nathaniel, and turns out Lotus had a huge issue with a junior winning. And Nathaniel didn't want to make it a big deal because of their whole, secret relationship. Addie understands, and they have this heart-to-heart where Nathaniel reassures her about how real their connection is. But then, another curveball. Addie's at lunch, minding her business, when Kenzie spills her chili all over Addie's lunch. It's embarrassing, and to make it worse, Kenzie picks up Nathaniel's poem, and the bullying kicks into high gear. Addie lies to cover up their secret, claiming she copied it from a book. She retrieves the poem, now covered in chili, and still clings to it like it's the only thing that's hers. Later on, when she realizes she's $1 short for her sandwich, guess who steps in? Hudson. Yeah, the guy who used to be her best friend. He's not acting like he's in with the cool kids anymore. Hudson pays for her lunch, which is kind of sweet, but Addie's too wrapped up in her secret to really tell him what's going on. She heads to math class, starving. But of course, Mrs. Bennett, Nathaniel's wife, doesn't let her eat. And that, my friends, is where the resentment starts to bubble up. Oh, and then we've got Eve again. She's out having dinner with Shelby, feeling completely uncomfortable as Shelby keeps talking about her perfect life. But let's just say it's not all sunshine and rainbows for Eve. After the dinner, Eve has this creepy moment outside when she thinks someone's watching her. And sure enough, she sees a shadow and, yeah, it's Addie standing in the bushes. Eve's completely freaked out, and when she tells Nate, he's not even fazed. He thinks she's overreacting. Eve insists Addie's been acting weird, sneaking around Art Tuttle's house, and now this. Eve decides to go to the principal, but Nate? He's not having it. It's one of those classic husband-wife moments where communication breaks down. Nate, though, makes this weird offer, giving Eve a massage, and out of nowhere, they start talking about having a baby. It's all very sudden. So Addie's life is spiraling. I mean, she's sitting there, feeling like she's in this endless loop of being the outsider, always on the edge of things, and trying to make sense of the mess that's Nathaniel and her. Remember, he was the one who made her feel special, right? But now, he's pulling away and she can't even get a single response to her messages. So she's at lunch, feeling all sorts of anxious and stressed. And guess who she's got to deal with? Lotus. Yeah, that girl who totally screwed her over in that poetry contest. Well, Addie's not backing down this time. She calls Lotus out, demanding the truth about how Mr. Bennett switched her entry for the contest. Lotus? Well, she's playing the innocent card, denying everything, and claiming Mr. Bennett made the decision all on his own. But Addie? She's not buying it for a second, and who could blame her? That's her future she's talking about, and she knows something's off. She goes straight to Nathaniel's classroom during his free period. Yup, even though he told her not to do that. She's desperate. She just needs to see him. But of course, when she finds him eating lunch, things get a little intense. Nathaniel's not happy about her showing up unannounced, scolding her for sneaking around. But Addie, poor girl, She's a wreck. She's sobbing, apologizing, just totally breaking down. And then, just like that, Nathaniel softens. He reassures her, tells her that he could never hate her because she's his soulmate. But then he drops the bomb. They need to be more careful. Eve is in the picture, and things are about to get even more complicated. He tells Addie they should cool it on the in-person meetings. But of course, they can still text on Snapflash. And before she knows it, Addie, feeling like a complete whirlwind of emotions, kisses him. And Nathaniel, he kisses her back. He quickly pulls back and reminds her that they can't risk this again for a while. As the bell rings, Addie leaves the classroom, determined to hang on to that tiny bit of hope that their future together is still possible. Now, over in the other corner of the story, we have Eve, who's absolutely livid. She just had that meeting with Principal Higgins where Addie straight up denied any funny business with her house. And Eve is not having it. She's pretty sure she saw Addie sneaking around, but of course, no one believes her. So Eve vents to Shelby, and this is where it gets interesting. Shelby suggests maybe Addie's obsession isn't with Eve, it's with Nate. And it clicks. Eve starts thinking about the scandal with Art Tuttle, how Addie has this history of getting involved with teachers, and now she's got Nate wrapped up in her web. Ouch. But Eve's not backing down. She's on a mission to get to the truth. So she heads to Nate's classroom during his free period, and what does she see? A gut-wrenching moment. There's Nate and Addie holding hands, and they kiss. No mistake about it. This isn't some one-time slip-up. It's an affair. And Eve is horrified. The pieces finally fall into place. Addie's hatred, the sneaky behavior, Nate's constant defense of her, Eve's world comes crashing down. Nate, her husband, is cheating on her with a student. And what does Eve do with that knowledge? She's fuming. And I mean fuming. At first, she's ready to out Nate to the entire school, humiliate him in front of everyone. But then reality sets in. Exposing him would ruin everything. His career, her career, and Addie's. So instead, Eve plays it smarter. She takes a photo of Nate and Addie, capturing the kiss as leverage. And it's a good move on her part, because while Nathaniel might not face criminal charges due to the legal age of consent, his career and reputation are about to go down the drain. Later, Eve runs into Addie again, and even though she's furious, she somehow keeps her cool. She's trying to distract herself, assign tons of work to her class, and just get through the day. But the anger's building. She messages Jay, asking for help. Because if there's one person she trusts right now, it's him. Cut to McDonald's parking lot, where Eve's spilling the whole mess to Jay. She's in tears, shaken by everything she's just discovered. And Jay's reaction? Well, he's not holding back. He's furious. And he wants Eve to lay down the law with Nate. Jay's like, give him an ultimatum. Get out of there. But Eve's torn. She's been manipulated by Nathaniel for so long. It's not as simple as just walking away. Jay encourages her to be strong, but you can see the weight of it all is just too much for her to carry alone. And now we get the grand confrontation. Eve's had enough. She's done playing the passive wife. She storms in, demanding a divorce, and she's got leverage with that photo she took. The tension in the room is electric. She's pushing Nate to quit his job, sever all ties with Addie, and own up to what he's done. We see the fallout. Nate's packing his things, and Eve's standing firm, closing the door on this broken marriage. Now, cut to Addie. She's at home, probably trying to do some math homework or whatever, when she gets a Snapflash message from Nate. And surprise, surprise, it's bad news. He's like, my wife knows everything, and she's threatening to ruin my life unless I end things with you and quit my job. Addie's crushed. I mean, this girl really thinks she's found her one true love. She tries to convince him to sneak over, but Nate's like, nope, Eve's got receipts, and she will destroy me. And then he casually drops, if she were dead, we could still be together. So now Addie's losing it. She's crying and spiraling into this pit of what-ifs. And instead of, reflecting on how Nate is a walking red flag, she starts blaming Eve for everything. like full-on hatred mode. She even thinks for a second, if she were gone, but then freaks herself out and tries to push the thought away. Meanwhile, Eve's at home, probably thinking she can finally breathe now that Nate's gone. She's sitting on the couch with wine and snacks, maybe watching some trashy reality TV to take her mind off things. But then, out of nowhere, crash! She freezes. There's no way she's imagining it. She hears footsteps and a voice. A girl's voice. And who is it? Drumroll, please. Addie. Yep, Addie. Standing there in her kitchen in the middle of the night, Addie's still all starry-eyed, clutching onto this fantasy that she and Nate are soulmates. And Eve? She's exhausted, furious, and surprisingly calm for someone whose husband just blew up her life. She tries to reason with Addie, like, listen, girl, this man isn't your Prince Charming. He's a full-grown toad. But Addie? She's not having it. She's like, you don't get it. He loves me. Which is yikes, right? Eve takes a different angle, trying to show Addie some compassion. She tells her, you're young, you're smart, and you don't need a guy like Nathaniel messing up your life. And for a brief moment, it seems like maybe Addie will hear her out. But then Eve drops the bomb. She suggests they go to Principal Higgins and tell the truth. That's when Addie snaps. It's not tears and yelling. It's pure rage. She grabs a frying pan, because what kitchen confrontation doesn't involve one? And wham! She swings it at Eve. One hit, then another, until Eve is on the floor, unconscious. Addie freezes, staring at what she's done. For a second, she's hoping Eve will move, make a sound, something. But nothing happens. And that's when Nathaniel's voice creeps into her head. If she were dead, we could be together. Chilling, right? Addie panics, fumbling for Eve's phone. It's locked, of course, but thanks to Eve's fingerprint scanner, Addie gets in. She dials Nathaniel, and when he picks up, she blurts out what happened. At first, he's like, what do you mean, might be dead? But then he pulls himself together and tells her to stay put. He's coming over. And there we are. Addie's standing in the middle of this nightmare, her world spinning out of control, waiting for the one person she thinks will fix everything. Only, we all know by now, Nathaniel Bennett isn't exactly anyone's knight in shining armor. Addie is just a bundle of nerves right now, feeling like the worst person alive. She's stuck in this pit of guilt after what went down with Mrs. Bennett, and she can't get rid of that horrible feeling gnawing at her. She's pretty much frozen, waiting for Nathaniel to show up. Now, when Nathaniel walks in, it's like he's in a whole other world. Dude is chill. Like he doesn't even flinch. He looks at Mrs. Bennett's body like it's just another problem to solve, confirming what Addie already knows, that she's dead, and boom, he's already moving on to the next step. No time for feelings. He tells Addie they've got to cover their tracks and fake Mrs. Bennett's disappearance. How? Oh, just tell people she went to visit her family. Like it's no big deal. But Addie, she's not 100% sold on this whole plan. You can see her hesitation. She's got that guilty feeling inside her. But you know what? She wants Nathaniel. She wants him so bad that she agrees. It's insane how quickly she talks herself into this. Cut to Eve. Our girl is still lying on the kitchen floor, her head aching like crazy, and she's barely hanging on. But hold up. The moment she opens her eyes, she's seeing Nathaniel standing over her like he's not even fazed. He's holding her phone, but not in a way that says, hey, I'm here to help. More like, yeah, I'm going to let you suffer a bit. Eve's memories flood back. She remembers everything. Addie, Nathaniel, the betrayal, and she remembers what she was going to do next, file for divorce. Eve's still got fight in her. Even after that frying pan to the head, she demands her phone to call for help. But Nathaniel, he's having none of it. He just gets more and more angry, shuts her down, and refuses to let her reach out for help. Now, Eve, despite the pain, still wants to take this all the way. She wants to report Addie to the principal. But Nathaniel, he's about to snap. He grabs her by the neck, choking her like it's just a small problem he's fixing. And that's when it hits Eve. This isn't just about stopping her from calling for help. Nathaniel wants her dead. He's trying to silence her, make sure she doesn't expose everything about his affair with Addie. The life is draining out of her, and she's thinking, who even cares if I die? Does anyone care? You've got to feel for Eve here. She's so alone. Meanwhile, Addie's got a whole new load of guilt to carry. Now, she's helping Nathaniel wrap up Mrs. Bennet's body in a navy blue sheet, trying so hard to keep it together. But can you imagine? She's already freaked out. And now she's wrapping up a dead body. Nathaniel's acting all cool, though. Even with this mess, he's got it under control, and he reassures Addie it'll all be fine. But then Addie spots these weird red marks on Mrs. Bennet's neck that weren't there before. And of course she's thinking, wait, what happened here? So she asks Nathaniel about it, but he shuts her down, all calm, like, nah, they were there. That's when the unease really sets in. Addie's feeling the weight of everything. She's thinking maybe she should call the cops, like she's having a moral panic moment. But Nathaniel? He's not about to let that happen. He spins this whole story about how Mrs. Bennet was a danger to their relationship. And he convinces Addie that if they don't cover up the crime, their future together is done. He plays her hard. He promises her this perfect life, free from the consequences. And it's like Addie forgets everything she's feeling. She's so in on this now. She just wants Nathaniel. And it feels like this is the only way to keep him. Okay, so part 2 kicks off, and y'all, we're officially stepping into Nathaniel's dark, twisted mind. Brace yourselves. Nathaniel straight up confesses to killing Eve. And guess what? He's not even sorry. Nope. No guilt, no regret. He feels relief. He's all, I never thought I'd hurt anyone, but with Eve, it just made sense. He talks about how he choked her, describing it with this eerie calm. He focuses on the fact that she's barefoot now. Eve, who loved her shoes, is lying there dead without them. To him, it's some kind of poetic justice. Now he's dragging Addie into this mess. He had Addie drive Eve's car to the station and park it, all to sell their story, that Eve had gone off to visit her parents. Addie, of course, had no clue she was walking straight into a trap. She didn't even think about the cameras that would catch her stepping out of Eve's car. She thinks she's the one who killed Eve. Nathaniel's just letting her believe that. Manipulation, level 100. He stayed back, parked just far enough away to avoid suspicion, watching it all unfold. And for a moment, he considered it, just driving off and leaving Addie there. She'd take the heat, and he'd be free. But no, Nathan needed her for the next part of his plan. So once she parked, Addie walked over and got into his car. They're heading out to an old, overgrown pumpkin patch Nathaniel remembers from when he was a kid. It's abandoned, creepy, and perfect for, well, burying a body. When they get there, Nathaniel's got Eve's body in a sheet like it's just another thing to carry. They park far from the patch because the road's rough, and as they're trekking through, Addie steps in a rotten pumpkin. Gross, right? But it's not just about the squish. She starts thinking about Eve's blood and how real everything is. Once they reach the spot, Nathaniel starts digging. The ground's rock hard, so it's slow going. And then, because Nathaniel's clearly on another planet, he asks Addie to help dig. She doesn't want to, obviously, but he insists. What's she gonna do? Say no to the guy holding all her secrets? And then, Nathaniel, in his super chill, terrifying way, tells Addie to lie down in the grave. To make sure it's the right size. Addie's like, are you serious right now? But Nathaniel's mood shifts angry, and she's suddenly very aware of how alone they are. As she's standing there, trying to figure out what's more dangerous, lying down or saying no, she notices something. Red marks on Eve's neck. Finger marks. And suddenly her brain goes, wait a second. Did Nathaniel kill her? She asks him about it, and he immediately gets defensive, like, you think I killed her? Really? Gaslighting 1 out of 1. Addie's freaking out inside. If Nathaniel did kill Eve, what's stopping him from, tying up loose ends? AKA her. But then Nathaniel switches gears, calms himself down, and makes Addie doubt her instincts. He's like, you're overthinking it. Chill. And poor Addie, she's so wrapped up in her feelings for him, she convinces herself he's right. Then Nathaniel suddenly remembers he left Eve's purse in the trunk. He walks off to get it, but not before dropping this gem. If anyone asks, you know nothing. Deny everything. Addie's been digging a grave. She's out there doing the dirty work, literally waiting on Nathaniel. Now she's thinking, this guy should have been back ages ago. I mean, how long does it take to get to the car and back? Maybe 30 minutes tops? But nope, it's been a whole hour. So Addie's like, screw this. Instead of filling the grave with soil, she goes for plan B. Just throws some dry leaves over it and heads out to find him. And guess what? Nathaniel's gone. Not just him, his car too. He left her. Like, completely ditched her in the middle of nowhere. Now Addie's freaking out. She's got a deadline. She has to get home before her mom's hospital shift ends. The last thing she needs is for her mom to roll in and realize Addie's missing. Oh, and by the way, nobody knows where Addie is. She's stranded, abandoned, and on the verge of full-blown panic mode. So in her desperation, who does she call? Hudson, her ex-best friend. Now, you'd think that calling him would be a huge risk, right? Especially after what went down between them. But she's desperate, so she calls him up. Hudson answers, but he's hesitant. He tells her that it's late, and with his learner's permit, he can't be out this hour without his parents finding out. He'd be in major trouble if they knew he snuck out. But, despite all that, Hudson comes anyway. 48 minutes later, driving in with his old, beat-up car. I mean, this guy looks like he hasn't slept in days. He's disheveled, tired, but when he sees Addie, there's that brief moment of relief on his face. And she's relieved too. For a split second, things feel a little bit normal again. But of course, Hudson's not blind. He takes in the muddy clothes, the dirty hands, and of course, her pumpkin-covered shoes. Yeah, something is definitely off. But Hudson's no idiot, and he doesn't ask a ton of questions. He just stays quiet for the ride. But then, of course, the quiet stretches too long and Hudson can't take it anymore. He breaks the silence and asks what happened. Now, Addie's dying to tell him everything. She wants to spill it all. About Nathaniel, what they did to Mrs. Bennet, and how she ended up stranded, feeling like a ghost of herself. But she can't. Not yet. She's tangled up in this loyalty to Nathaniel, as twisted as it is. And the fear of losing Hudson's trust forever? That's even worse. So she keeps quiet, avoids his gaze, and just stares out the window. Hudson's offering to be there for her, even apologizing for being distant, hinting at the event that ruined their friendship. But it's unsaid. No one talks about it. And Addie, she feels the guilt creeping in, knowing that she can't trust him with the truth. Not now. Not after everything. As they're driving, Hudson's phone rings. Addie notices it right away. Hudson glances at the screen but doesn't pick up. He just lets it ring. His fingers hover over it, but he decides not to answer. Addie doesn't ask who it is, but in the back of her mind, she's wondering if it's his parents. If they've found out he's out, breaking curfew. When Hudson finally drops her off, Addie says her goodbyes. She gets out of the car, but there's a lingering feeling in her chest. She watches him drive away, and for a moment, she feels a mixture of gratitude and fear. He promised to keep her secret, but she's not sure how much longer that can last. And then we cut to Nathaniel. This guy's got zero remorse. He wakes up feeling all kinds of relief that Eve is gone. He thinks everything's finally over, that his life's back on track. He believes Addie either buried Eve's body or, well, got caught. Either way, he's convinced he's in the clear. His track record is clean. He thinks Addie is too unstable for anyone to believe. Classic narcissist, right? Nathaniel's all set to start his day feeling untouchable. But then, boom, he spots something in the bathroom. Eve's red pumps, just chilling in the bathtub. What's that about? It's unsettling, but Nate, he's not even fazed. Instead of feeling any kind of guilt or remorse, he's thinking, hey, I could sell these for a nice profit. But then, a faint tapping sound outside the bathroom door. He brushes it off, even comparing it to Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. So yeah, not exactly a great moment of self-reflection. He just keeps moving, planning his day. And of course, just like any well-rehearsed villain, he's planning to call the cops after breakfast. Meanwhile, Addie's up all night. I mean, who wouldn't be after what happened? She's haunted by the image of Mrs. Bennet's lifeless body in the pumpkin patch, and those red marks on her neck, they're burned into her brain. Addie's mom checks on her in the morning, but Addie's too terrified to even open her eyes, pretending to be asleep. She can't face it. She can't face the reality. By lunch, she forces herself out of bed. But what does she find? Hudson's message, "Are you okay?" Of course, she can't reply. It's just too much to deal with. And knowing that Hudson's probably going to figure out what's going down with Mrs. Bennet's disappearance, it's suffocating. Then, Addie does something we all do when we're desperate for reassurance. She checks Snapflash for a message from Nathaniel. But nothing. His account is gone. Deleted. She feels like she's been dropped into a void. He's erased himself from her life, and it hurts more than anything. She's abandoned. Then, Addie thinks about deleting her own account. Like, maybe Nathaniel's gone for good. But then again, what if he tries to contact her? What if he needs her again? Addie's trying to eat, but nothing tastes right. She clings to Nathaniel's last advice: deny everything. That's all she has left to hold on to. Nate, after killing his wife Eve, is trying to cover his tracks. He pretends to be concerned and reports her missing to the police. Speaking with Detective Sprague, the detective, sharp and observant, digs into Eve's planned secret trip and missing car, but doesn't immediately find anything suspicious at Nate's house. However, she does notice a pair of Eve's shoes with pumpkin on the heels, which sets off Nate's paranoia. He begins to worry that someone might be framing him or that Eve had an affair. Meanwhile, Addie, who is also under suspicion, is questioned by Detective Sprague. The detective finds a threatening letter Addie wrote to Eve, though Addie claims it was for an assignment. Despite this, Sprague begins to suspect Addie's involvement, especially after learning she had access to her mother's car the night Eve went missing. As the investigation deepens, both Nate and Addie feel the pressure mounting. Nate is uncertain if anyone knows the truth about Eve's death, while Addie realizes Nathaniel might be using her as a scapegoat. Nate's beginning to feel the heat, and it's not just because of his own guilt. Detective Sprague is on his tail, digging deeper into Eve's disappearance, and every time she calls, it's like another nail in Nate's coffin. The detective mentions she spoke with Addie, who's now a key suspect. Nate, of course, tries to distance himself from Addie, probably thinking he can let her take the fall. After all, he's got the letter he saved, Addie's strange behavior, and, oh yeah, her fingerprints on Eve's car. He's hoping all of that will point in her direction. But what really gets under Nate's skin is something a little more unsettling. A mysterious package arrives at his house. Women's shoes with dirty soles. He thinks it's someone messing with him. Someone who knows just enough to expose him. Nate's paranoid, and honestly, can you blame him? The next day, Detective Sprague shows up again. She's not letting up. She presses Nate about his relationship with Addie, revealing that she knows all about her. She even knows Addie was in his English class and involved in the poetry magazine. It's like Sprague's getting into the depths of Nate's life, and it's all starting to spiral out of control. Nate tries to deny anything inappropriate, even though he's got his own suspicions about Eve's possible infidelity. He can't escape it. The suspicion is mounting, and Sprague's not backing down. Still, she doesn't have concrete proof, so there's not much she can do yet. Meanwhile, we've got Addie, who's tangled up in guilt and fear. She's avoiding everyone in town, trying to keep a low profile. But of course, that doesn't work out too well, because she runs straight into Detective Sprague. And let me tell you, Sprague is sharp. She questions Addie about her relationship with Nate. But it's not just about facts. She tries to play it cool, suggesting to Addie that if anything went down between her and Nate, it wouldn't be her fault. Addie's already reeling, and Sprague's got her shaking. She warns Addie that Nate's painting her as the one responsible for Eve's disappearance, calling her a stalker, a murderer, all of it. The weight of that accusation hits Addie hard. She denies everything, of course, but you can see the doubt starting to creep in. And then, as if that's not enough, Sprague hands her a card, leaving Addie even more unsure about what's really happening. Is she the target? Is she the scapegoat? Addie's head is spinning. No matter how much she tries to push away the reality, she can't escape the mess of Nathaniel, the police investigation, and the shadow of Mrs. Bennet's disappearance hanging over her. She's haunted. Every little sound feels like it's a step closer to everything crashing down. Her guilt, her confusion, and the sheer weight of the situation are pressing down on her. The fact that her own mother's asking questions only makes it worse. But as if things weren't complicated enough, there's someone else knocking at her door. Enter Kenzie Montgomery. Yep, the same Kenzie who'd been tormenting Addie at school. The one who always seemed to have it out for her. But now, drenched from the rain and visibly shaken, Kenzie's not here to cause trouble. She's apologizing. And not just a sorry for the petty high school stuff. No, she's apologizing for the bigger, much darker part of her past with Nathaniel. Kenzie and Nathaniel? They've been having an affair. Not just a fling. No, she's telling Addie that it's been going on since she was a freshman. Yeah, before Addie even came into the picture. Talk about a punch to the gut. Kenzie, looking like she's carrying the weight of her own demons, spills it all. Nathaniel wasn't just a teacher to her. He wasn't just the guy who manipulated Addie either. He'd been using Kenzie too, weaving lies and promising her they were soulmates. Classic narcissist move, right? He played both of them, knowing exactly how to manipulate their insecurities, their desires, their need to be loved. Kenzie has screenshots of conversations with Nathaniel showing the manipulation, the lies, and how he'd been stringing them both along. Addie feels her stomach turn as Kenzie lays it all out, the truth in black and white. It's like someone's ripped the blinds off her whole world. Nathaniel, the guy she thought was everything, turns out he was a master manipulator, using both of them for his own sick pleasure. And now Kenzie wants redemption. She's not here to just stir the pot. She wants to go to the police to expose Nathaniel for what he really is. This isn't about revenge. It's about making things right. She's been carrying the burden of what Nathaniel did to her, and she's done with it. But Addie, she's torn. She doesn't know if she can trust Kenzie. After all, they've been enemies, right? How can she believe someone who's made her life hell? But those screenshots don't lie. And deep down, Addie knows. She knows that the man she loved, the man who made her feel like she was the only one, wasn't just deceiving her. He was playing her from the start. Addie finally makes up her mind. It's time to take action. She can't live in this suffocating fog of uncertainty anymore. She can't just sit there, letting Nathaniel's lies control her life. She agrees to go with Kenzie to the police to tell them everything. And just like that, the tide starts to turn. Addie's no longer just a victim of Nathaniel's twisted games. She's finally taking control, ready to expose the man who had ruined so many lives. Addie can barely sit still. She's sitting there, trapped in the stark, uncomfortable room of the police station, the hum of fluorescent lights only adding to her anxiety. Kenzie's with her, but she's acting so different from Addie. Addie's terrified. She can barely breathe as she waits to speak to Detective Sprague. She didn't tell her mom she was coming here. She doesn't want to make things worse with lawyers and investigations. She's already so deep in the mess, she can't think straight. But even with all of her fear, Addie feels a weird kind of trust in Kenzie. It's complicated? Kenzie tormented her all year, yet here they are, bound by this horrific shared secret. Still, Kenzie's playing with her hair, fidgeting like everything's casual. She's trying to avoid the seriousness of the moment, but Addie knows they're about to confess everything. Then, Detective Sprague walks in. She's sharp, focused, exactly what Addie was hoping for. But Kenzie's already breaking down before the detective can even ask the right questions. When Sprague presses her on the relationship with Nathaniel, Kenzie cracks. Tears are streaming down her face, and it's clear this isn't just about Mrs. Bennett anymore. She's emotionally exhausted by the weight of it all. But then Addie steps in. Addie's shaking with fear, but she knows it's time to face the truth. No more lies. She says it. She admits she's been sleeping with Nathaniel for the past year. All year long, even though he demanded she keep it a secret. Detective Sprague reacts the way anyone would, with rage. But there's something else there. She's not angry at Addie, not really. She's furious with Nathaniel. The truth is finally coming to light, and Sprague's on Addie's side. She knows they have to tell the full story. Addie can't hold it back anymore. They can't pretend anymore. She admits to burying Eve's body and tells the detective everything about Nathaniel's twisted, abusive behavior. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's spiraling. He's consumed by anxiety and dread, trying to outrun the consequences of what he's done. He's driving through the pouring rain, thoughts racing faster than the car. His hands grip the wheel, his heart hammering in his chest. He's certain that Detective Sprague is closing in on him, maybe even knows the truth. He's been avoiding her calls, but eventually he picks up the phone. The detective's voice is cold, firm. She's already been to his house and plans to send a patrol car to pick him up. And just like that, Nathaniel's mind goes wild. Did Addie betray him? Did Kenzie say something? His thoughts become a whirlwind of terror and justification. He's back at his house, drenched from the rain, and as he walks into his kitchen, he sees something that makes his stomach drop. A jack-o'-lantern. It's decayed, rotting. The pumpkin's face barely recognizable. It shouldn't be there. It's past Halloween, and it's just wrong. A raven suddenly bursts out of it, just like that. The raven's wings flutter, and Nathaniel freezes. He's not superstitious, but right now, he can't shake the eerie feeling that it's a sign. His mind reels with panic as he remembers the lines from Poe's The Raven, the word nevermore echoing in his mind. Nevermore. Nevermore. It's not just about death anymore. It's about the relentless, unending cycle of his guilt. This raven symbolizes his fate, a fate that can't be outrun. Drenched, cold, and consumed with dread, Nathaniel drives out to the pumpkin patch, where Eve's body is buried. It's a reckless journey, driven by a growing, gnawing need to see for himself that Eve is dead, that she's buried where he left her. He's convinced that if her body's disturbed, it's a sign that her soul is coming back for revenge. As he drives through the rain-soaked night, he can't stop thinking about the raven. It haunts him, the fear of Eve's spirit tormenting him, her death not being the end. When he finally arrives at the pumpkin patch, it's as bleak and desolate as ever. The rain's pouring, the earth's soaked, and as he steps into the patch, the ground's heavy with mud. He walks past the decaying pumpkins, heart hammering in his chest until he reaches the grave. But there's nothing there. The ground is disturbed. The earth is dug up. Eve's body is gone. Nathaniel falls to his knees, panic overtaking him. His mind spins. What happened? Who took her? Is her spirit trying to get back at him? And then something strikes him from behind. The world goes black. This is the point where everything shatters for Nathaniel. Welcome to part 3. This is going to be the shortest, but something that is going to fuck your mind. You've listened to the whole story just to know this bit of the truth. So here it is. Let's bring back Eve. Yes, you heard it right. Eve is buried alive. Wrapped in a sheet, smothered by dirt and leaves, her body aches and her breath is shallow. She's been through hell already. Her husband Nathaniel tried to strangle her once, and Addie had already hit her with a frying pan. Now they're trying to finish the job. But Eve isn't going down without a fight. She's determined not to let them bury her alive. The silence around her is deafening until a voice breaks through. A young female voice calling out, "Nathaniel?" Eve stays still, trying to control her breathing. No sound from Nathaniel. The rustling of leaves fills the air, and she feels them falling on top of her. She doesn't move, doesn't scream. She just waits. "Nathaniel." The voice calls again. It grows fainter, then stops altogether. The earth is still. Eve waits, heart racing. The moonlight barely reaches her now, hidden beneath layers of dirt and leaves, but she's calm. She has to be calm. Eventually, after what feels like hours, Eve manages to free herself from the dirt. Her hands are shaking as she digs her way out, every breath a struggle. When she finally breaks free, she notices her purse. They buried me without shoes on. Now she's walking barefoot through the uneven dirt, her feet stinging with every step. The cold cuts into her, but she wraps the sheet around her shoulders, using it as a makeshift shawl to ward off the chill. After what feels like an eternity, she sees a road in the distance. Her phone is buried deep in her purse, but when she digs it out, she finds she has cell service. 1 bar. A miracle. Eve dials 911, but then hesitates. She could call the police and get Nathaniel thrown in jail, but she knows how this works. He'd get a lawyer, post bail, and be out in a few days. He's a master at slipping through the cracks. No, she needs to make sure he pays for what he's done. Instead, she reaches out to the only person she trusts, Jay. It takes him 20 minutes to reply. Eve's shivering, standing in the cold, wondering if he'll even come. But then his name flashes on her screen. Eve? His voice is instantly concerned. What's going on? I need you to pick me up, she says, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I know it's early. Within minutes, Jay's on his way. When he pulls up, Eve bursts into tears. She climbs into his car and he looks startled by her appearance, her bare feet, her tear-streaked face. Eve, he says, his voice full of concern, where are your shoes? The question only makes her cry harder. Jay doesn't ask more questions. He starts driving and they sit in silence as Eve cries, letting the weight of everything crash over her. When they reach Caseham, Eve tries to stop him from going to her house, but Jay turns in the opposite direction. He pulls into the parking lot of Simon's Shoes. Come on, he says. Let's get you some shoes. Eve picks out the ugliest black snow boots she's ever seen, but they're on sale. She digs into her purse for her wallet, only to realize she doesn't have any cash. Don't worry about it, Jay says, cutting her off. I've got it. She doesn't argue. Instead, she slips on the boots, and though they're hideous, they warm her cold feet. Jay sits beside her, waiting patiently, even though the sun is starting to rise. Finally, Eve can't hold it in anymore. Nate, he tried to kill me. Jay's face freezes in horror, and for a moment he doesn't speak. Eve tells him everything. How she was buried alive, how she escaped, how Nathaniel tried to end her life. But she's not ready to let him get away with it. Eve shakes her head when Jay suggests calling the police. No, she wants him to suffer. Jay agrees to help her. He takes her to his tool shed where she can hide for a few days. And that's when it happens. Jay does what Eve couldn't. He takes a rock and knocks Nathaniel out cold. Jay is bigger and stronger, and Eve knows that if she had tried, it wouldn't have worked. She needed this. Needed him to be sure that Nathaniel would never hurt her again. For the past 2 days, she's been tormenting Nathaniel, just like he tormented her. She knew he'd be haunted by the raven, the way it had appeared in his kitchen, symbolizing doom and guilt. She knew it would drive him crazy. It's time for Nathaniel to face the consequences. The raven has come for him, and this time, there's no escaping. Eve, with her resolve, stands over Nate, who is now submerged in the cold, muddy grave that he deserves. Her hatred for him is palpable, a feeling that has been building for years, and now she finally has him right where she wants him, powerless, helpless, and at her mercy. Nate, bound and half drowned in the muddy water, gasps for air as he looks up at Eve, his voice shaking with panic. The once dominant figure of the man she once loved is now reduced to a man begging for his life, knowing that every word he says is an attempt to claw back some sliver of hope. His pleas fall on deaf ears, though, because Eve isn't listening. She's long past caring about what he wants. In fact, as she stares down at him, there's a certain satisfaction in seeing him break. There's a calmness in her now, one that she hasn't felt in years. I'm so sorry, Eve. I made a terrible mistake, he sputters, but Eve isn't buying it. She's too far gone, and she doesn't need him anymore. You came back to make sure I was really dead, she says, her voice a cold, cutting truth. She sees through every excuse, every attempt at manipulation. Nate's words are pathetic now. He tries to bargain, to make empty promises, but it's too late. His pleas for mercy only fuel Eve's fire. She's done with the games, done with the lies. When he asks for another chance to be let out of the grave so they can talk, Eve only grows colder. "No, that's not going to happen," she replies. There is no redemption for him. And then, as if fate itself decided to take her final moment of revenge, Eve picks up the shovel. The cold, hard metal gleams under the dim light as she scoops up a chunk of dirt. She doesn't hesitate. She throws it on him. Nate screams, begging, pleading. "Eve, sweetheart, I'm so sorry for everything. I love you. You have to know that. You can't do this to me." His words are desperate, but they don't reach her. Not anymore. They're just noise. Each shovelful of dirt that lands on him feels like an echo of everything he's put her through. Eve's face hardens with each plea. This man, her husband, has made her feel small for so long, and now she has the chance to make him feel the same. But as the dirt piles up, Jay intervenes. He grabs Eve's arm, pulling her away from the grave. His concern is clear, but Eve is resolute. She's certain now. She lifts her chin, meeting his eyes. "I know," she says, a terrifying clarity in her voice. "I know I'm going to kill him." Jay hesitates, but eventually, he follows her back to the grave. They continue the work, filling the hole, burying the man who has ruined both of their lives. Nate's cries grow weaker, more panicked, until the mud silences him completely. And when Eve finishes, when she places the final handful of dirt on top of him, she feels a strange sense of peace. The man who betrayed her is gone. In the silence that follows, Eve recites the poem Nate once wrote for her, back when he was just her teacher. "Life nearly passed me by. Then she, young and alive, with smooth hands and pink cheeks, showed me myself, took away my breath, with cherry red lips, gave me life once again." The irony of it all strikes her, how Nate once saw himself as a savior, a poet, someone who believed in the concept of soulmates. He gave this poem to her when she was just a girl, and now it feels tainted by everything he's done. 6 months later, Addie's life looks a whole lot brighter. She's at school, smiling as Hudson calls out to her from the parking lot. He's still the star quarterback, and yeah, colleges are lining up for him. But more importantly, he's always got time for Addie. Now, about Nathaniel and Eve. Turns out Nathaniel ran off before the cops could get him. And then, surprise, Mrs. Bennett reappears. She claims she just took a bus trip to get away. Addie knows that's a lie, but there's no proof, so the police can't do anything. Mrs. Bennett quits her job and leaves town. And Nathaniel? Let's just say Addie and Kenzie weren't the only girls he was creeping on. Addie and Kenzie have become real friends. They talk about everything and even go to therapy now, which is helping them heal. Back to Hudson. Hudson works so hard, juggling school, a part-time job at Simon's Shoes, and babysitting his little brother. But he always makes time for Addie. That day, they're headed to a diner for milkshakes before his shift starts. Then Hudson's phone buzzes, and he gets this text. When Addie asks about it, he says it's from an old friend. She jokes, "Girlfriend?" And Hudson blushes like crazy. He's so awkward about it, which makes Addie wonder who this girl was. Hudson says she used to come to the shoe store a lot and that she was having a hard time, but she's doing better now. Addie doesn't press him for details. As they walk into the diner hand in hand, Addie realizes something. She's ready to enjoy the good things in life. No drama, no lies, just a simple, happy moment. So here's my question. Did you catch the big link between Addie and Eve? Hint, it's all about the shoes. Drop your thoughts below and let me know what book I should cover next. If you've stuck with me this far, I think I've earned a subscribe. All right, that's it for this story. Until next time.